So I tried to give you a little bit the introduction about, very briefly in what we consider as patient-centric drug product development, and then give an example on multiparticulates. Now, the reason why I'm here in two different aspects is that we work at Capsugel since many years on multiparticulates specifically. And on the other hand, at the Graz University, we are really working with the patients to understand what patients think, believe, do with the drugs, and here specifically to the older patient. And the outline is a little bit that I give you an introduction into what patient-centric product design is, about how this target product profile really is developed, and then really a case study that is coming from Bent Research and ex-Capsugel on how you can really go along with some kind of technology. Now, what is patient-centric product design? First of all, when we start to do product development, our objectives, and that's what a pharmacist learns immediately when they start, it's about quality, it's about safety, and it's about efficacy, right? And we are now talking more about effectiveness. I don't know how familiar you are with effectiveness, but efficacy is what we see in randomized patient population in a clinical trial. So I have my patients, very specific, very well surveyed, and that's what I get out. Effectiveness means that what is happening in the real world. And everybody knows, or we know it, there's a lot of evidence that there's a huge gap. What I see in my clinical trial, I cannot repeat in real life. So there's a gap between efficacy and effectiveness. And that's where this patient centricity is coming in. I show you a very good patient-centric product. This one. Just saw it, just for you. There are 3 buttons. One is white, which is laser, red and green. So even in my age, I can use it. You know that if you have sometimes these devices, you always go in the wrong side. And then suddenly it's dark. And this is a very simple device, which is, for me, I would say, presenter-friendly or presenter-centric, because you can't make a mistake. And that's what we defined in our paper on what is patient centricity. Patient centricity means that it is a process to identify the comprehensive needs of an individual or a target population and utilize these identified needs to design pharmaceutical drug products that provide the overall benefit to risk profile, the best benefit to risk profile. And this is not 5-year stability. That's not the best PK. If it comes along with 150 restriction, take it before breakfast, take it after breakfast. So if you consider that these patients do not get just a single drug, they get maybe 10, 15 drugs. In total units, maybe 20. And if you have all of these restrictions, what you will see is that patients need to take 7 or 8 times during the day a drug. So I can, just ask you to think about it. What would it mean for your life if you have 8 times to take a drug? You can't do anything because you're just structuring, the day around this schedule, which is extremely complex. So what it means is that it is not our technical view on it, what patients need or what is a risk or a benefit. We should also not consider that for patient the reduction of mortality is necessary what they want. I can just tell you there's a lot of world weariness. Patients say, I had my life, I just want to spend the rest of my days with my family. I want to be well, and if I die, I die. Death is natural. It's a very interesting thing when you really work with this kind of patients. So do not consider that the way we look into benefit risk is exactly what a patient is doing. There is a huge difference. Now we come to this target product profile. That is introduced with the quality by design, where it is, by the way, the first guideline which says that the quality is the outcomes of the product in the hand of the patient. Medication errors that occur is a quality issue of the product, not a problem of the patient. There's a huge error of medication errors taking place on a very natural base. Patients have their logic. Yeah, never forget that we do 5 years in university. Then we work for 20 years in this industry. We talk about dissolution and tablet splitting and. A patient is neutral to it. They use a lot based on learning, on prior learning. Yeah? We had here a study done at the Charité with patients in daycare. And there was a question on a tablet. There was a tablet and, we asked the patient, can you split it? They looked to it and said, I can split it. There was no score in it. But they said, I can split it. I do it with the others, so why shouldn't I do it with this one? Why do I have to take this white tablet before breakfast and this after? These are both white tablets, so what? So they don't understand that if we say to them, listen, that's with, you're in a food, in a fasted state, that's where it is dissolved and absorbed afterwards, you have an issue. They will not really understand what we do. So that is a little bit what we investigate here at the patients. Who really is a patient population? What are their needs? In which context the entire therapy is taking place? And if we say, I have a perfect product, I have a beautiful video I can show you, they say we need to protect our tablet. So what we do is we take these vials and we put cotton on it, right? So because they are so sensitive, because they are fast dissolving, so they're very porous and very low friability. And then you have a patient to say, gives them this box. They should open and take out the cotton. They can't. Yeah? So we basically create an issue to solve our issue. That's not patient-centric. What it is, how can we follow the logic of a patient and how can we really address their needs within their therapeutic schedule, their disease burden, their therapeutic burden in total. On the other hand, we still have what is typically the work of a pharmaceutical scientist to look into how can I design a product that is performing well and that provides safety. And again, if you have an enteric-coated tablet, be aware that patients will crush it, they will split it, and do not try to explain a patient that they should take it intact. The leaflet is the first thing they throw into the bin. The first thing, because they can't put it back into the carton. And indeed, we have our criteria. This is what we want to achieve. And this still is not just that we focus on our technical excellence that requires a lot of education for a patient. Still keep in mind, I like it, I have these 2 ones here. This is for idiots. Even I can use it because you can't make a mistake. Behind is a lot of technology, but it's a very simple use here. If you take this old one here, there was a manual you need to read. I don't know if you still remember that you get a booklet with this telephone and then they tell you how to go through all of this. And a little bit, this is what we have to consider here. Let's make it as simple for the patient in their environment, the way they use it. And afterwards, you have your technology selection. That means you're not saying, I make a white tablet, immediate release, or I use this technology. The most important thing is that you have a base of many different technologies available. And it's not to say I have a technology and now I apply it to a patient population. It should be the other way around. You have your product performance you're looking for, you have your patient profile, and based on this you look what is the best technology to select and use in this specific patient population. So, you might be aware that this is pediatric. I mean, that came up 2007, 7, with a reflection paper from the European Medicines Agency that there need to be something done because you could not administer the drugs to children and young kids. Last year, in August 1st, they published the first draft of their reflection paper for older population. And this was now commented until end of January, and we will have the final version very soon. This is a very important aspect to consider. Pediatric development started after the reflection paper. Now, the geriatric, or more or less patient centricity, will start immediately after the final publication of the reflection paper. And if you look into the wording, you will see that they will apply it to all new application, abridged application, that you need to provide evidence that you really address the needs of the patients. So this paper, or this reflection paper, will come very shortly and will really get into our development laboratories, and we have to justify it. But we are setting up, by the way, a working group, so if you're interested, just let me know, because we have a working group we established with the Geriatric Medicine Society and the APV to address the issues, because pediatric and geriatric is different. It's completely different. If somebody, you very often hear, I can do pediatrics, I can do geriatrics. And then they come up with these swallowing issues, yeah? It's nice to have solutions, but it would be better if you first understand the problem. Because children is an immature swallowing process. In elderly, it's completely different. And you have many more issues than just the administration of the drug. So what we need to find is this sweet spot here. How can we best address all of this in our development programs? Indeed, the patients will somehow impact our freedom on technology. So there is certain resistance in this industry. You always get, these issues from manufacturing. They say, yeah, but, I just don't want to have anything which is more personalized. I want to have maximum 2 dose strengths and then most likely the same. But this is not really something which will completely change our processes. It's just that we first think who will be our target population. And many things we are still doing and we can do if you first address it. So let's take a look to how it would be if we look to it. We have, let's say, a generic target population. Yeah? And I say this is a specific population which is a patient profile, patient which have chronic kidney disease. Very interesting results coming from the Berlin aging study, which is the second one now, enrolled in 2014 and until 2016, including more than 2,000 inhabitants of Berlin, over 65, and also young comparison group. And they did the complete assessment. And they will follow up these patients over the next years, like they did for the first study, to see what are the aging markers. The very important finding here was that 25% of the patients, the older patients, had chronic kidney impairment. And guess what? Only 1% knew about it. This is a very critical finding. If we see we have a drug which is kidney cleared, and we say, we don't need to do anything because, they're only in the chronic kidney impairments, but the patients don't know about it. So we will have a kind of issue. Now we say it is a CNS indication, Alzheimer, dementia. This is related to really swallowing issues. In this patient population, you see that they are not able to swallow, and that's the patient population where everything is crushed and then put somewhere in food and then administered to the patient. Nobody's considering how or if it is possible. So this is where you get much more of this information, who is your patient population. Based on this, you can say, well, what is then my API, my drug substance? It should be immediate release. You might have solubility issue, taste issues. You might, everything what you need to put here. And based on this, you say, let's now look into how can we make a dosage form out of it. And even here, you might say it should be somewhere, in a single dose unit somewhere. But at the same time, you do not want to have 10 different products basically manufactured, because that is a nightmare if you say, you have a tablet with 10 different dose strengths. Your manufacturing will run nuts because they're always doing individual small batches. So based on this information, you really look into this area here. From my experience, what I see is that the target product profile in a lot of companies is nothing else than a targeted certificate of analysis. Nothing about the patient. You see 5-year stability, impurities, and so on. But you do not really see anything about the patient and the group. So that's why I think we can still improve to make it a real target product profile. Now, when we look to this multiparticulates, and I come to this multiparticulates because that is a very, very smart way of having dose flexibility and swallowability and customization, maybe fixed dose combinations that can be done. And as you know, there are many ways of creating multiparticulates. You have either lipid multiparticulates, you can have spray layer dispersion, pellets, mini tablets. All of them, they have a specific advantage, disadvantage, and depending on what your drug needs, you put the technology within these multiparticulates. Because then you are flexible on your manufacturing to use the large-scale commercial manufacturing, where you manufacture just these multiparticulates or mini tablets, and then you fill them at different doses into any kind of delivery system. So you have this flexibility of using large-scale plus individualization or more patient-specific dosing. So when you look then to the technology selection, you would say, I take this example that's coming from Capsugel from Lonza, where we have a clear understanding, or the folks at Band, a clear understanding in what kind of API you have, what kind of solubility, lattice energy, and so on this compound has. And then you can select what could be a technology that would provide you with the right exposure. And based on this graphs here, you can select what kind of product you design to really get the technical things done. So you start first of all from really this angle here to say I have to address this. You see what is needed, and now you come to your selection of the technology. And based on this technology, you indeed look into the dose form selection. How can you then convert these multiparticulates into a dosage form, something that you can provide to the patient? And there are plenty of ways you can do this oral disintegrating tablets, but then you need to do it for each dose strength, which require a complete new dossier. You can do it in sprinkle capsules, you can do it in sachets or suspension or any novel device. Now you must be very careful here what this means if you do it in this sense. In such devices, you would rely on the user to be capable of dosing correctly. I can tell you, you need to have very good dexterity, you have a very good eyesight to really be able and capable of measuring it. The same is for the spoons. For the capsules and for the sachets, you have an opening issue. Yeah, you cannot easily open the sachets, and you cannot easily open a capsule. That is also a fact. So we might not be able to have the ideal product, but we can select the best product for this specific patient population. If we have very old and frail patients, we can consider that it is most likely administered by a caregiver or healthcare professional in a hospital. Then we do not have an issue as if it is for a blood pressure lowering drug where the patient uses it themselves. And that's also a big difference between pediatrics, where you have young mothers very engaged and very critical to the therapy. They can be educated easily, and they can really deal with it. And then, if you take the capsules, you can put them the different amounts within a capsule, and they can put it on food. Now, that is also a request from authorities that you need to do some food stability study. You should not put it into massive food because the patient might not eat a lot of food, specifically not the older one, so you need to have it in a small portion. But that's the way how this drug then could be administered. And now I show you a little bit of technology because some kind of promotion needs to be in. That's a lipid multiparticulate process where, which is a proprietary technology where the extrusion and the melt, you put a lipid and the drug together into this melt spray congeal technology. You see that in the middle you have a very fast turning plate which atomizes this lipid vehicle, and then they dry down. And what you get is a core, very precise particle size, where you have lipids and hydrophilic channels here. And then you can coat it so that you get taste masking sufficient at at some oral pH to not dissolve. Normally the food, it should also not dissolve in food. The extreme is applesauce and yogurt, which is somewhere between pH 4 and 6. And the gastric juice is, as you know, much lower. And then you can take these particles, you can sieve them, you can coat them in the fluidized bed, and you can encapsulate them or put them otherwise. As I said, how this works, you see here the very spinning of this wheel here, and you see that this lipid phase is spread around and forms very small particles. And then they cool down, that's the congeal, where you have here the melt and then the spray and congeal technology, and then they cool down and you collect this particle. So it's a very efficient, very easy process, or not easy from a scientific perspective, because the lipids, the process conditions, that's what you need really to understand. But once you have set these conditions, it's very straightforward process. So how does it work again? This is aqueous diffusion through the porous matrix. Is that if you look to this particles, it looks like a little bit like this, where you have the lipid and drug crystals inside, and then you have this hydrophilic excipients which forms like pores, and this is how they look like when you cut them. And in the dissolution process, what you can see here, they are intact. And then they start to pick up this moisture. They start to release the drug, and they get really dispersed then in the gastric intestinal tract after 60 minutes. that's the way how this can be done as a let's kind of technology assessment that can be done quite quickly, where you have a first definition on how you use this technology, how you develop it, and then you go into the formulation development. You have then the manufacturing prototype, and then you can start the stability. So that's really about how you can quickly get to the point that you can make a decision on really the final product. And this is just a little bit the summary of products that have been developed in different technologies, not only this lipid, this melt spray congeal technology, but just giving you a little bit the overview about how they could look like and how they can be used then in different ways. Yeah? So as a summary, it's really that that technology should not drive the process. It's the patient needs that gives us really the spectrum of where we can work, that patients use it correctly, where we avoid medication errors, where we avoid non-adherence. A lot of this non-adherence is really coming from the fact that patients do not understand or cannot use our products. Yeah? And I really also about drug names, please tell your marketing that patients do not recognize any of the brand names. Yeah? Simvastatin becomes Simsalabim. That's a true fact, and I had patients who gave drugs numbers really to understand what they have to take when. Yeah, but that's just a side comment, and with this I would like to thank you very much. And if you want to join, this APV, please just send me an email, and I give you all the details on this one. Thank you.